In 10 years, this world ends not metaphorically, not slowly, but violently as the Federation Kingdom collapses, the nobles are slaughtered, and everything burns because of 5 people known as the 5 great sins: wrath, greed, sloth, pride, and obsession. And the man who knows all of this is not a hero, not a chosen one, but a 78-hour-per-week wage slave who suddenly wakes up as a noble in a fantasy world. Alan does not panic immediately, because the bed is too soft, the room is too expensive, and the servants bow like he owns the place, until he tries to read and realizes he cannot understand a single word, no system, no translation, no cheat, just pure illiteracy. While he questions, the butler watches silently, because the young master is holding the book upside down. Alan's first conclusion is painfully accurate. He has no powers, no talent, and no special ability, making him a useless fantasy protagonist. But before despair fully kicks in, a mountain of food arrives: meat, bread, sweets stacked like a boss fight, and his thoughts reduced to a single word: good, as he eats until he is full for the first time in years. And at that moment, nothing else matters. Then reality escalates again, when a maid politely asks if he is finished, and another offers to help him bathe, which turns out to mean a massive luxury bathtub, and 2 servants scrubbing and massaging him at the same time, causing Alan to mentally disconnect. Because if this is hell, it is extremely comfortable. That illusion shatters when a servant casually mentions that the other young masters are returning tomorrow, and Alan freezes. Because other young masters means family, so he asks who they are, and the servant looks at him like he just forgot his own name, and answers Leo and Antonio before asking why he speaks as if he does not know his own family. That single sentence hits him harder than any spell, so Alan submerges his face into the bath, because this is too stupid to be real. And in that moment, the truth slams into him: this world is psychedelia, the dark fantasy RPG he used to play, where the ending never changes. The 5 great sins awaken, the kingdom collapses, and the nobles die. And the very first noble family to be completely annihilated is the Palladio family, his family. Leo, the prostitution king; Antonio, the drug king; and a third son who dies quietly without meaning, Alan Palladio himself. He collapses, soaked, shaking, and furious, because in the game this family was a tutorial tragedy, easy experience points. But in reality, he is living inside it, and luxury means nothing when you have a 10-year death timer. So absurdly, he wishes to return to being a wage slave, because at least that life did not come with a confirmed execution date. He spirals, complains, and pities himself until something changes, because Alan realizes something terrifying. He knows the future, every disaster, every trigger, every sin, which means this is no longer a tragedy, but leverage. So why wait 10 years to die when he can remove the cause and stop the 5 great sins before they awaken, not to save the world, not to be a hero, but to protect his peaceful, noble life? That is when Alan decides he will reform the 5 great sins while they are still children. 2 months later, his knight Evan reports success. The human testing facility is destroyed, the children are rescued, an orphanage is established, and its management is entrusted to a girl named Yusa. And Alan praises Evan with forced confidence, even though Evan cannot tell if it is sarcasm or approval, while Alan realizes his facial expressions are completely broken. Evan is blunt, loyal, and honest, one of the few good people in this world, and Alan recruited him the moment he recognized him from the game, and Evan confirms the real target was Yusa before hesitating and admitting she is not normal, because when he saw her locked in a cell, she was emitting a deep red aura strong enough to terrify mercenaries, and he does not understand why she never escaped. Evan asks why Alan did not bring her home, and Alan agrees out loud, but internally knows the truth, because Yusa Ludia is destined to become Wrath, a non-human, who will one day contract an otherworldly being and massacre hundreds of thousands, but only after years of suffering, so no suffering means no awakening. Alan leaves her in peace and tells Evan it is not time yet, a phrase that alone shocks him, then orders secrecy, continuous funding, and hands Evan a letter claiming it is reassurance, when in reality the letter contains 3 phrases ripped directly from the game trigger words: lore, Locked spells dialogue hooks that Alan believes will stabilize her. When Yusa reads the letter, the mana in the room explodes, and she asks why Alan does not want her by his side, forcing Evan to repeat the words, "It is not time yet." And instantly she calms down, clutching the letter like scripture, smiling softly. A subtle, terrifying smile, the smile of wrath. Miles away, Alan lies on the floor, completely unaware that his reassurance letter has been interpreted as divine prophecy. The next morning begins violently when a pile of books from his own library falls on his head before Evan bursts in announcing that the second child has been rescued from an illegal slave market, causing Alan to immediately ask with genuine concern whether the child was treated kindly, which Evan confirms without hesitation. Before anything else can be discussed, the door explodes open and Antonio, the second son, enters, mocking Alan for studying and placing his elbow on Alan's head like a piece of furniture, demanding a response. And while every instinct tells Alan to fight back, he shocks everyone, including himself, by kneeling, immediately bowing his head and submitting, completely choosing survival over pride. Evan, watching, realizes Alan understands the hierarchy perfectly. That submission lasts exactly 1 second before a dagger flies past Antonio's face, and Leo, the eldest son, appears, telling them to be quiet and ordering Antonio to leave with polite murderous intent, pressing a dagger against his neck, and insulting him for being weak against drugs, which prompts Alan to roll away, instantly dragging Evan with him as he escapes. Only then does Alan realize the truth. The Palladio brothers are not minor villains like in the game. They are real underworld rulers fighting over the family, and provoking either of them guarantees death. So his only plan is to remain weak, useless, and invisible. An explosion erupts behind them, confirming the brothers have begun fighting, and Alan collapses into his room exhausted, where Evan casually drops another terrifying detail. The second rescued child is also abnormal. Alan freezes. That child is Duce, the future sin of Sloth. In the game, Sloth was not lazy, he was methodical, cruel, and repaid every injustice tenfold. And Alan vividly remembers the purple mana tearing bodies apart, which makes his hands tremble as he repeats the excuse, "It is not time yet," and sends Duce to the orphanage. He even writes casual complaints in his letter to Yusa, joking about being used as a chair to build familiarity, and warns her to take care of a sick child. At the orphanage, Yusa meets Duce, immediately recognizes the marks of abuse, declares that the black goat was responsible, and proclaims that the great moon has chosen him in his broken state, promising revenge if he devotes himself completely to Alan, as mana surges violently from both of them, until Yusa notices Alan's letter and calms down, deciding she should reply first. The next day, Evan bursts into Alan's room, screaming that something terrible has happened. Duce is dead. Alan can only stare in disbelief, because the sin of Sloth has died far too early, and the funeral that follows is absolute madness. Women complain about hunger, drugs are everywhere, and the Palladio family proves itself completely insane, even in grief. As Alan studies Duce's body, he notices something off and catches Leo smiling like he just won the lottery, realizing this death was no accident and was likely ordered by Leo himself. A year passes. The family stabilizes, Leo divorces, the drug trade quiets down, and Alan becomes a pen pal, with Yusa convinced this growing familiarity is part of his plan, as her letters describe happy children playing games, growing well, and putting on puppet shows, which convinces Alan that everything is finally working. Then a servant reports a clue regarding the third boss, and Alan relaxes, believing peace has arrived. The scene cuts. A drug distribution site erupts in chaos as criminals are forced to kill themselves, screaming that their bodies are moving on their own, and a cloaked girl arrives praising the puppet show, revealing that these massacres are the performances mentioned in the letters. Duce is alive. He never died. He confirms that these killings are preparation for the place where Alan will return, because it cannot be shabby when he arrives. And as they fly away, they leave behind the symbol of the blue moon. Time accelerates unnaturally, 2 years vanish, and Evan returns exhausted to report the final child has been safely delivered to the orphanage, completing the set of future world enders. Alan insists he is smiling and attempts to move his face, resulting in a barely noticeable twitch, which only makes Evan suggest that he simply say it instead. And Alan relaxes, admitting that things have gone far better than expected. He reflects that the bosses of psychedelia only became the five great sins because of extreme trauma and horrific pasts, and that preventing those tragedies early had a very low probability of success, which means the fact that everything seems stable now is almost unbelievable. Alan asks for an update on the orphanage, and Evan hands him Yusa's latest letter explaining that the children who once resembled broken dolls are now bright, healthy, and growing normally, which genuinely surprises Alan, who realizes he does not even need to hire a caretaker, and silently praises Yusa for managing the orphanage so well despite her personality being completely unsuited for it. Alan openly admits that Yusa is a good kid in her own strange way, and Evan asks if the letter contains anything important, to which Alan summarizes that everyone is healthy, some children are growing especially fast. Alan feels genuine relief, believing that all five future sins are now developing normally, which confirms his belief that environment determines destiny, until Evan moves closer and asks the question Alan has been avoiding, when exactly he plans to meet the children in person. Alan panics internally because he has no intention of ever seeing them face to face, since their original transformations were so grotesque that even the game's flashbacks terrified him as a player. And while he hopes they are better now, the thought still scares him, so he avoids eye contact and mutters a vague answer, maybe in 5 years, which Evan accepts without question. Alan concludes that his only remaining goal is to gain just enough personal power to protect himself from whatever consequences his interference may cause, and begins practicing magic, convinced that talent matters, and this body fortunately has it. While watching, Evan casually asks if Alan has heard of the Blue Moon, and Alan dismisses it as some vigilante group hunting criminals that probably disappears later, because it was never in the game, until Evan adds that Blue Moon also kills nobles, which immediately terrifies Alan and causes him to stop practicing and order Evan to sleep in the room next to his own. The scene cuts to the orphanage, where Yusa gathers the children and announces the weekly Blue Moon activity report, as Pride cheerfully describes executing slave traders, Greed calmly explains dissolving corpses, and Sloth confirms annihilating bioweapon labs and Avalon operatives without a trace. Yusa listens calmly and declares that everything is proceeding according to his will, reminding them that they exist only for the Great Moon. Then a problem arises, as Deuce reports that the head of Avalon is the eldest son of the Palladio family, and that Leo is actively targeting Alan, which triggers an explosive reaction, as Yusa's aura floods the room with terror before she regains composure and orders that once the Count dies, Leo is to be quietly eliminated with poison. 2 years later, the Count dies officially from a heart attack, though Alan knows better. And during the funeral, rumors spread that Blue Moon attacked again, frightening the populace far more than he expected, as he and Evan quietly leave the ceremony unnoticed by most, but carefully observed by someone else. Evan asks what Alan plans to do now that Leo will inherit, and Alan calmly tells him to pack, because they are leaving, not abandoning the territory, but relocating south to Rodmill, a remote village which Alan believes is the perfect safe zone. 3 days later, after briefly enjoying a peaceful meal, Alan is abruptly dragged back to the estate for another funeral, because Leo is dead, stabbed through the heart, and Alan cannot understand how or why his brother died so early, as knights refuse to meet his eyes and servants tremble when he speaks. When Alan asks what happened, no one answers, and Evan finally approaches, hesitantly asking the impossible question, whether Alan himself was the mastermind who eliminated Avalon overnight, causing Alan to look around and realize that everyone now believes the useless third son is a terrifying shadow ruler. With no other way out, Alan quietly answers yes, and in his own mind commits fully to his final escape plan, Rodmill, the place where he will hide, save the 5 great sins, and somehow stop the world from ending, even if it sounds like the delusion of a man who has started believing his own legend. As Alan prepares to leave, Leo watches from a distance, debating whether killing his useless little brother is even worth the effort, because he had already planned to poison him eventually. And now that Alan is leaving quietly, there is no reason to act yet. Despite this, Leo still orders one of his men named Almond to follow the carriage. Almond hesitates and asks if Leo wants Alan killed, which shocks Leo, because Almond has never questioned orders before, and the sudden hesitation irritates him further when he notices Evan nearby gripping his sword, making the tension unbearable. So Leo snaps and orders Almond to do exactly what he was told. Before Leo can say anything else, Almond draws his sword and stabs him straight through the chest. The betrayal is so sudden, it almost feels unreal, as Leo collapses, screaming, demanding to know how Almond dared betray him, only for Almond to smile coldly and admit that pretending to be loyal had been fun, before revealing his true identity as a member of the Blue Moon trained by the Red Moon. Since Blue Moon is the sword of that man, Almond explains, acting according to his will is natural, and anyone who threatens the Great Moon must be erased. Then he twists the blade deeper, rips it out, and leaves Leo screaming as he bleeds to death, mocking him for taking 2 whole years to finally reach this moment. Leo swears his men will hunt Almond down, but Almond calmly replies that Avalon has already been erased and vanishes into the night. The next morning, Alan wakes up in Rodmill, stretching lazily, convinced he has finally reached paradise, waking when he wants, eating when he wants, living the quiet, noble life he dreamed of, until Yuan enters holding a letter. Alan barely looks at it until he reads the contents and freezes, because Leo is dead, and his free trial of heaven lasted exactly 4 days. Yuan leans in, whispering the most terrifying sentence imaginable, asking when Alan became the shadow leader, and why he never mentioned it, causing Alan to collapse, panic spiraling, as he mutters that nothing makes sense anymore. Yuan calmly explains the problem: Leo died after Alan left. Alan has a perfect alibi, and no one stands in his way, which means everyone believes Alan orchestrated everything, the shadow leader, the assassin of the swordmaster, the hidden ruler. Alan tries to reason it out, saying no organization could erase Avalon overnight, before remembering there is one group that hunts organizations, Blue Moon. But Yuan shuts that down immediately, explaining that Blue Moon always leaves their mark, and this time there was none, only clean sword wounds. Alan connects the dots and whispers that the road to hell has opened, realizing that this is exactly why he is being labeled the shadow leader. He insists Blue Moon cannot be responsible because they never even existed in the original game, which only makes the situation worse. The scene cuts to Blue Moon headquarters, where Yusa casually asks if any trace was left, and is reassured that nothing remains except a single leaf. More members arrive, reporting that nearly 500 Avalon soldiers remain, and another cheerfully admits cutting them apart piece by piece, as Yusa's bloodlust leaks into the room, and she quietly declares perfection. Avalon collapses completely in 15 days, but a problem remains when evidence surfaces showing nobles were involved, and Yusa's aura explodes, filling the room with killing intent. Orders are issued silently, efficiently, and absolutely. The information guild is sealed, the matter is personal, and nothing must ever reach that person's ears. When one member hesitates, Yusa strikes him without warning, reminding them that a sword must not think for itself, and that Blue Moon exists only to move according to his will, because he knows everything. The room freezes, no one dares breathe, as Yusa calmly warns them never to disappoint him. That night the moon shines brightly over the world. The scene shifts to Alan slumped over a desk buried under mountains of paperwork, his face pale, eyes lifeless from exhaustion, as he groans that he cannot take this anymore because a full month has passed since the funeral, and the work never stopped, and he collapses forward muttering that he is going insane. He slams his hands on the table, furious, because Leo's death was supposed to happen 6 years later, and by dying early, the entire course of the game changed, dumping every responsibility onto him, as servants immediately flood the room with even more urgent documents, causing Alan to freeze mid-motion and sigh heavily. He snaps, asking why everyone suddenly works so hard when they used to slack off under the count, only to realize the staff is terrified, whispering that the young master is angry, and that they must work harder or die, confirming Alan's worst fear that the rumor of him being a hidden mastermind has fully taken root. Alan breaks, slamming his pen down, shouting that he is not some terrifying monster. He is just a former wage slave who wants to do his job, quietly wishing desperately that people would stop overreacting and handle things themselves. Outside, Yuan grills meat, humming casually, and remarks that it is astonishing Alan reached the second tier of poison craft in only 2 years, something most people take 4 years to accomplish, praising his talent as Alan listens blankly and admits his talent is decent while thinking bitterly that he only learned magic for self-defense. He conjures a faint glow of mana, watching it flicker and fade, admitting quietly that he has tried every type of magic, but his mana pool is too small, thinning faster with every use, and that no amount of training can change that because innate mana capacity is like a natural weight class, and his is simply too low. Tears form as he mutters that nothing is working, and he is only trying to survive. While eating barbecue, Yuan casually hands him a letter, his invitation to a noble exchange ball, forcing Alan to sigh, wondering why he must attend something so pointless. The scene shifts to a luxurious party where Alan and Yuan wear formal attire, but Alan looks exhausted as he reminds himself that networking is necessary for survival, even though he hates it, while Yuan ignores him entirely, enjoying the food. Alan forces himself to socialize, complimenting wine, attempting a practiced smile, but his expression terrifies a noblewoman who runs away screaming that she will tell her father, causing Alan to spiral into despair, realizing people believe he is extorting rare wine through intimidation. Yuan laughs it off, explaining Alan's loot reputation has grown again, and wine as Alan sinks further, realizing his social life is completely destroyed, and that nobles now avoid him entirely. Seeking air, Alan steps onto the balcony under moonlight, questioning where everything went wrong when a gentle voice interrupts, and a girl introduces herself as Laura, the third daughter of Duke, instantly triggering Alan's alarm, because the Alive family is one of the 3 major shadow players and notorious northern troublemakers. Laura bluntly begs for help, revealing she is about to be assassinated by her own sister, explaining she survived only because she was a mistress's child and now offers half her family fortune in exchange for protection, which makes Alan realize she must have died early in the original timeline, since he does not remember her at all. After a long silence, Alan refuses, gently bowing and explaining he cannot help because he can barely protect himself, and does not want to give her false hope, even wishing her luck and urging her to find a reliable ally before leaving her behind. From the shadows, Rhina calmly reports Laura's approach to the Great Moon and receives confirmation that Laura is not tied to Avalon, and therefore not a target, ordering all information blocked so nothing reaches him, and the Avalon case remains sealed. Later that night at the party, Alan leans against a wall rubbing his temple muttering why misfortune seems to orbit him like a curse when a light melodic voice greets him, and he looks up to see a red-haired woman smiling effortlessly making him freeze. Because, for once someone is actually talking to him. He forces a polite smile recognizing her immediately as Lady Zeniona, and her amused reaction confirms his fear, because she is famous in the worst possible ways, and in his mind the realization locks in she is one of the three great shadow players. Alan recalls the underworld hierarchy Alida of the North Pelotonia of the East and Genea of the West, and as he studies her movements, he understands she belongs to the West, the one that does not destroy enemies, but absorbs them. Zeniona teases him effortlessly, and Alan responds with flawless noble etiquette, while internally screaming that he must never get involved with someone like her, because all he wants are just enough connections to survive quietly. She leans closer inviting further conversation, and Alan bows politely inventing an excuse about too many eyes on them, silently begging to be released, and her parting words chill him as she promises they will meet again, confirming that the predators have noticed him. From the shadows, two figures observe confirming the Avalon case is sealed, but nodding someone else is still watching Alan wearing the mask of talent before disappearing into the dark. The next morning, Alan and Yuan stand before a massive canyon swallowed by unnatural darkness, even at midday, and Alan confirms this is the place he was searching for his real objective, the labyrinth of whispers. He explains that clearing all 8 rooms grants a powerful artifact, and casually admits he memorized every route from the game, shocking Yuan, as the entrance reacts to Alan's touch, revealing living stone walls breathing with mana. Inside, shadows crawl, monsters lurk, and Yuan warns that a single mistake will mean death, but Alan moves with eerie calm, solving the mechanisms, as if he has walked this path countless times before. The doors grind open, revealing grotesque carvings, so disturbing Alan turns away, fighting the urge to vomit as they enter the treasure chamber filled with ancient relics, and his eyes lock onto a single black ring, pulsing faintly with dark light. Alan orders Yuan to take only the ring, dismissing every other treasure as trouble, and confirms its identity, the oath of restraint, finally easing the pressure crushing his chest. The relief lasts seconds. The ground shatters, ancient golems rise from the canyon walls, mana cores blazing, and Yuan shouts that this is the worst possible outcome, pushing Alan back and telling him to run. Alan refuses, calmly stating that this time he will handle it, as the golems charge, shaking the cavern, and Yuan screams for him to save himself. Alan speaks one sentence, activating the ring. I evolve the oath of restraint. Reality distorts, light explodes, and the chamber is consumed by blinding power. Time stopped, and the world dissolved into a vast void. An ethereal voice echoed through the emptiness, ancient and overwhelming, announcing the inheritance of the great will of Nyakula. It demanded that 2 restrictions be spoken. Alan immediately realized that this moment had appeared as a simple selection window in the game. This was the true clear reward of the labyrinth. A restraint, an absorption-type artifact that imposed limitations on its user in exchange for immense power. Hearing the voice made him certain that this was no longer a game but reality itself. He muttered that he knew this part well. For the first restriction, he declared that whenever he used magic, he would always perform the hand signs of Babylonia. The void rippled, and the voice asked what he desired in return. Alan answered without hesitation that he wanted the power to twist the laws of this world even further. The being granted his request. Then he spoke the second restriction, stating that whenever he used magic, he would strictly chant the words of Babylonia. Once again, the void rippled and asked what he desired in exchange. Alan answered firmly that he wanted even greater power to defy the laws of the world. Silence followed, and for a brief moment he feared he had made a mistake. Then the being granted his request. The voice returned, deeper and more ancient, expressing gratitude to the human who remembered the gestures and mysteries of a forgotten god and who had inherited its will. Alan was confused by those words. Inherit the will, what did that mean? The ring was completely absorbed and the restriction was successfully applied. The voice said it would be watching him, the one who inherited the will. In the next instant, Alan snapped back to reality. Evan was still desperately trying to stop him as the golems advanced. Alan raised his hand again as mana surged within him, forming a small sphere of lightning. It should have shone brightly, yet even after pouring in all his mana, it remained faint. No matter how much he trained, this had always been his limit. Now it was time to test the restraint and the price he had paid for it. Focusing deeply, Alan cast his spell. A powerful sphere of energy formed between his hands, radiating a blinding aura that spread across the surroundings. It felt as though he was unleashing and absorbing an enormous surge of magical power at the same time. The atmosphere trembled as swirling blue-white light and crackling electricity enveloped him. Waves of energy rippled outward, giving the impression of overwhelming spiritual and elemental force. Then Alan began to cast a spell beyond comprehension. The moment his energy erupted completely, the entire scene was consumed by blinding light and violent lightning. Raw magical force exploded outward. Amid the chaos, Alan stood tall beneath the radiant burst, his cape billowing behind him as he raised his arm toward the sky in a gesture of control and dominance. Then performed a series of intricate hand signs, releasing a relentless torrent of magic. Evan stood frozen in shock as Alan's power slammed into the orc horde. In an instant, the stone orcs crumbled and shattered one by one, reduced to dust and sparks. Evan could hardly comprehend what he had witnessed. This power was beyond anything imaginable. As they left the canyon, Evan turned toward Alan, still reeling, wondering if he had been hiding his true strength all along. In 15 years as a mercenary, Evan had never seen anything even remotely close to this. He asked in disbelief whether that had really been second-tier magic. Alan confirmed it calmly. Evan fell silent. Alan reflected that even he hadn't known such amplification was possible. In the game, spells could only be enhanced by either a sign or an incantation per turn, but this time the attack power had doubled. A chain lightning spell stacked through 4 incantations and hand signs, forming a configuration suited for large-scale lightning magic. In exchange for always using signs and chants, he had gained something divine. An ancient invocation echoed in his mind, thanking the one who inherited the will of the great god. That was why the magic had amplified beyond reason. As they reached the canyon's edge, Evan collapsed with exhaustion, muttering that the ordeal had been tougher than the battle itself and wondering who could have designed such a place. Alan answered quietly, thinking that the Whispering Labyrinth was also known as the Maze of Polion, created by someone named Polon. Evan barely processed the words before stumbling, and Alan supported him as they headed east. Night fell as they traveled, Evan muttering about 3 weeks of hardship while Alan mentioned he had something he wanted to do once they returned. Under the moonlight, Alan reflected that choosing signs matching a spell's attribute altered it directly, far more than the game's simple stat boosts. Each incantation visibly transformed the magic itself. Perhaps it was because he was especially skilled at controlling mana. Once recovered, he planned to test it again. Everything had turned out well. After a long night, they mounted their horses and continued home. Unseen, a figure watched from the shadows. Renaa sat atop a tall tree, moonlight glowing in her eyes. She leapt down and approached the canyon, where glowing glyphs engraved in stone spoke of a forgotten outer god and the empire of a lamp. When she touched them, energy flowed into her, revealing fragments of history. Alan had repelled the invasion and defeated Alakalaka. She remembered the great Emperor Polion and realized the incantation Alan used did not exist in the ancient library. She wondered who he truly was. Days appeared, reporting coldly that the Dark One was dead. Renaa prepared to report it. The scene shifts to Count Senonia's residence, where Kalia sits calmly sipping tea, her eyes narrowing. As she realizes the rumors were true, she remembers that gaze cold, emotionless, like staring into the abyss. Count Senonia is powerful, renowned. Yet something feels off despite never attending social gatherings he still claimed she was famous fascinating. Is it father you are the count after all? At his desk, her father writes a letter as Kalia's smile deepens. She snaps her fingers dark. Energy surges from her hand's black aura, flooding the room as she bends his. No one will ever suspect she turned her own father into a puppet, allowing her to rule as the true head of the household. A faint light flickers her thoughts racing. How did they find out even the spy she planted was discovered? Then the truth clicks. The one observing Alan earlier had been her spy. Before she can think further, a servant rushes in, urgently calling Lady Kalia to her room. Inside, she finds the spy dead on the floor. The seal never activated, meaning he revealed nothing. Before dying, Kalia narrows her eyes, realizing the body was deliberately placed here. A red aura blooms around her lips, curling into a smirk. She laughs softly, admitting she was caught off guard. Her greatest weakness exposed the moment. Elsewhere, Alan and Evan rest in their carriage, exhaustion finally overtaking them. Evan falls asleep instantly. Meanwhile, Loria travels toward the Altia ducal estate, her face heavy with regret and fatigue. She knew from the start he was not someone to underestimate, a man of the underworld. With eyes colder than steel, the last lifeline, she had yet someone who would never accept a deal that cost him anything. Her siblings had stripped her of everything: Tamerlan, Marin, Ki, Pai, all assets gone, only surviving through her father's mercy. Even that now uncertain. As she enters the estate, despair overwhelms her. Maids rush toward her, trembling. Lady Loria, they cry. Lady Pyron and Ki have taken their own lives. Her body freezes, fear seizing her heart. She asks about the others, and is led to a horrifying sight. Tamerlan and Marin lie dead, swords pierced through each other's chests. Her mind screams in confusion, terror choking her. How could this happen? Outside the estate, Raiden departs swiftly, a faint smirk on his lips, whispering mission accomplished. Loria recalls Alan's earlier words that good things would happen. A chill runs through her veins. Realization strikes. The true mastermind had finally moved. Overnight, she becomes the sole successor of the Altia family. She wonders what kind of monster she made a pact with, but there is no turning back. Those who betrayed him always meet the same fate. She steels herself, choosing to walk this dark path. 2 months later, a grand gift arrives addressed to Alan. Evan stares in shock. Cernant's wine, a treasure worth thousands of gold. Alan reads the letter, discovering it was personally prepared by Loria, the youngest daughter. The servant confirms the Duke herself sent it. Duke Alan pauses, realization hitting. Loria has become the Duke. The scene shifts to Loria in her office, buried in documents stretching back. She notes how quickly 2 months passed after her father's funeral. She officially took the seat once forbidden to her siblings. Deaths raised no suspicion. She had a perfect alibi, attending the ball. Her secret organization had been destroyed, leaving her powerless. But upon returning, she saw the truth. His refusal had been a lie. He cleaned everything flawlessly behind the scenes. She wonders how far into the future he planned this. She never even informed him of her father's death, yet he still acted. There is only one reason: he needs Altia for something greater. Despite merging all subordinate organizations, her power still pales compared to his calm, terrifying influence. Which means he wants something she alone possesses: the Altia name, political authority, the ability to manipulate the stage from the shadows. She focuses on her duties, certain the distinguished one of the underworld will contact her soon. Hopping her gift of gratitude was enough. Time passed. 5 years before the original story, Alan adjusted to his role as Count, receiving letters from Yusa describing the children growing well. He decided it was time to let them step into the world, preparing gifts for each of them, knowing their talents would shape the future. As evening fell, Alan finished his work, smiling quietly, hoping that one day they would return his kindness. Far away, Yusa gathered everyone as new letters arrived, each addressed individually, marking the beginning of another chapter in their intertwined fates. Before anything else, Yisha suggested that they read the previous letter first, since the new instructions required careful attention. Sioring spoke excitedly, pointing out that until now only Yusa had been allowed to read them. She explained that the fact Alan had sent each of them a personal letter meant he had decided it was finally time for everyone to see everything. As the letter was read aloud, confusion spread across Seorang and the other sins. Renee commented that it sounded like nothing more than casual small talk, but Yisha smiled and explained that from the very beginning Alan had disguised his orders as ordinary conversations. As the letter went on, it became clear that within those simple exchanges he had designated elimination targets, assigned missions, and demanded reports afterward. Suggested they check another letter, placing Blue Moon in her hands. Everyone could see it clearly now. He had personally chosen each of them. The sins grew excited, and Days nodded, agreeing that this method reduced the risk of information leaks. Yisha reminded them that the most important thing was to clearly understand the orders and carry out the missions exactly as instructed. Days wondered aloud whether it would be safer to meet Alan in person or use magical communication, questioning why letters were necessary if secrecy mattered. Yusa responded seriously, reminding them that their only duty was to obey Alan's orders. She gripped her letter tightly, and Days sighed, recognizing her unwavering resolve. Seorang clapped her hands excitedly and suggested they finally read their assignments properly. One by one, they revealed their destinations. Days explained that Alan had ordered him to go to Caliban, the nation of knights. Seorang scoffed when she learned she was being sent to a desert colony she disliked. Raiden calmly announced he was headed to Rixus, the entertainment city. Renée said she had been ordered to Lania, the city of mages. Finally, with a confident smile, it was revealed that Yusa herself had been assigned to the Holy Kingdom of Rosario, a destination fitting her presence perfectly. Days admitted he didn't understand why, but Alan had ordered him to become a knight, and Seorang added that Alan told her not to worry because patronage would continue. Renée mentioned that the locations of their gifts had also been revealed, and Raiden calmly said they would understand everything once they arrived. Yosha reminded them that until Alan himself said it aloud, the name Blue Moon must never be spoken. Everyone agreed. The next day, they gathered and departed to carry out Alan's orders. 3 months later, Alan sat in his office and sighed. As expected, there was no noticeable change in magic formulas or phrases. He muttered that he would have to experiment on his own. Looking at Yuan, he asked how the investigation into Leo's assassin was progressing. Yuan replied that the Information Guild still hadn't found anything. Alan was briefly surprised, then asked if there was any other news. Quietly, he admitted that the butterfly effect caused by saving the 5 deadly sins had already spiraled out of control. Even Loria, who should have died in the original story, had become the Duke of Aelia and was now expanding her influence across the underworld at a terrifying pace. Alan let out a tired sigh and told Yuan to stop investigating the assassin altogether. He already had too many responsibilities. Yuan looked shocked and asked if he was sure. Alan explained calmly that sometimes ignorance was safer. In a place where even the Information Guild felt uneasy, touching matters that weren't meant to be uncovered could invite death itself. As long as he didn't interfere, secret organizations had no reason to target him. Yuan nodded and said he would inform the guild. Then he remembered something else and added that Days had been appointed as a knight in Caliban. Alan looked up in surprise and smiled, saying that was good news. 3 months later, Yuan returned again with snacks and more news, saying that Days had created an entire knight order. Alan straightened immediately. That meant Days had to be at least an expert, possibly even nearing swordmaster level. According to Alan's knowledge, sword ranks progressed from sword user to sword expert, then swordmaster. It hadn't been long since Days' appointment, yet rumors were spreading across the continent that a 5th master knight would appear within 10 years. Alan raised an eyebrow and confirmed that they meant the sword of Caliban. Yuan nodded, saying Days was incredibly talented and gaining followers rapidly. 6 months later, nearly a year after the 5 sins left the orphanage, Alan had fully adapted to life as a count when Yuan rushed in again with urgent news. Days had officially become the Sword of Caliban. Alan froze. That title was reserved for swordmasters, beings who had surpassed aura blades and unlocked derivation. He asked if Yuan truly meant Days had reached swordmaster level. Yuan clarified that while Days hadn't yet formed his derivation, the nation had granted him the title anyway, especially after he defeated the fourth sword and another master knight had died in the Northern War. Alan reflected that such wars had lasted decades, and mastering derivation usually took far longer. Reinhardt, the youngest master knight in history, had taken over 20 years. And now Days, who once knew nothing of swords, was approaching that level. Alan smiled faintly, wondering if he might benefit sooner than expected, or perhaps not at all. Holding a letter, he explained that he had only ever received letters from Yusha, who continued writing even after leaving for the Holy Kingdom, updating him on all 5 sins. Though they had never seen his face, he felt a twinge of sadness that none had thanked him directly. He corrected himself quickly, reminding himself that as long as they lived well and didn't destroy the world after awakening, he was happy. The scene shifted to Caliban in the central region of Karam, where the grand mansion of the Solar Eclipse Knight Order stood. Inside, knights trained relentlessly. At the top of the mansion stood Days in full uniform, calm, imposing, and strikingly handsome. His title echoed across the nation: Days Mycelian, captain of the Solar Eclipse Knights, youngest master knight. A girl waved at him joyfully, calling him brother, and he smiled back, far more composed than in his childhood. Memories surfaced of losing everything to the black things, of his sister falling into darkness, of rage consuming him until he nearly lost himself. He had sworn allegiance to the great moon in desperation, believing it was his only path forward. Every mission under Blue Moon had been a step toward revenge. Then, one day, he received a personal order unlike any before, leading him to a small village in southern Caliban to retrieve a gift. He hadn't cared at first, until he arrived and saw it. The gift was his sister, alive and waiting. The final line of the letter shattered him, saying the gift from the great moon was his family. Days broke down, tears streaming as he embraced her. Later, over tea, she explained how she had survived, trapped in darkness until a powerful figure pulled her into the light, and years later rescued again by Evan, Alan's knight. Holding Alan's letter, she repeated his words, promising protection, medicine, and safety under the name Palacio. Days finally understood that the great moon had protected her all along. He didn't know how Alan knew everything, until memories of Yusa and her strange reactions snapped together in his mind. Everything aligned at once. He finally understood why she always said a sword could never move without its master. Darkness washed over Days' thoughts as the realization struck him that the foolish one had been himself all along. Yet even then, a small hope remained. Silly snapped him out of his spiraling thoughts, asking softly if he was okay. Inside, Days understood that his sword had dared to act alone, yet the great moon had still chosen mercy. He imagined how the great moon had guided his life like a perfectly arranged strategy, as if every step had been calculated in advance. He whispered that he had spent years consumed by hatred and revenge against the black things. When he looked at his sister, her cheerful expression carried the brightness of someone who had survived endless darkness. She had lived, saved by the great moon, and their family had been protected. To Days, that survival felt like a gift beyond measure. His thoughts twisted again as Yusa's words echoed in his mind. She had always said that one day he would understand why she followed the great moon. Now he realized she had never been a blind fanatic. She had simply understood. He remembered the letter that told him to go to Caliban and become a knight, and only now did the reason become clear. Determination hardened his expression as he swore to repay that debt by becoming the pinnacle of Caliban, a master knight who would create his own knight order filled with the finest swordsmen. Not long after, a tall knight approached and informed him that the time had come. Days stepped forward and looked down at the assembled Solar Eclipse Knights, declaring that this expedition would be their first stepping stone. Hardship meant nothing to him. Gripping his mesmerizing yet terrifying sword, he declared that he awaited the day he could properly offer his gratitude to the great moon. His eyes burned with dark resolve as the solar eclipse knights marched out to battle the barbarians, his loyalty to the prodigy of their age unwavering. Elsewhere, Alan sat quietly outside, thinking that the place felt strangely peaceful, perhaps because all his children had grown up now. A sudden gust of wind sent pages flying, and he reached out to catch them, muttering that everything seemed to be flying away, joking to himself about whether it was some kind of omen. He soon refocused on his research. Since returning from the labyrinth, he had shifted his attention to the strange phrases he had encountered. Letting out a small chuckle, he felt satisfied that his reports were finally complete. Refraction strengthened flaws within a completed spell, allowing its range to expand, while repulsion distorted the structure and affected the trajectory of fired projectiles. Based on his observations, blue light reinforced parallel magic such as lightning. He recalled the spell he had used in the dungeon, and theorized that linear refraction granted penetration, creating a critical effect on impact. That explained why the massive golems had been obliterated instantly despite their size. He carefully noted the strict rules required to activate his spells. With his current mana, he could only use magic once per day, and it had taken an absurd amount of time just to understand this much. His expression grew serious as he remembered the world's limitations. The hand signs and phrases of Babylonia had long been forgotten, with no written records remaining, forcing him to rebuild everything alone from scratch. Strangely, he enjoyed the challenge. Although he had learned magic for self-protection, he brought his fingers together, preparing a spell he had refined for 2 months. Explaining that removing the focal point of the mana sphere created imbalance and sparked lightning. A small purple lightning sphere appeared, which he dismissed as weak and worthless fixation magic. But the moment he completed the chant, thunder rippled outward. He continued, chanting compression, tightening the condensed magic canon as the phrases broke apart and reassembled. At the final instant, he completed the last hand sign, triggering the spell's built-in purpose. A violent thunder cannon erupted skyward, blasting into the heavens as massive energy flooded the area, shaking the ground and bathing the field in brilliant blue lightning. Alan finally understood that order mattered. When he had tried breaking the structure first, the spell had failed instantly. As the realization settled in, a voice echoed behind him, calling it impossible. Alan spun around sharply, shock freezing his expression as he saw Kalia standing there with her butler, her red hair catching the fading light. Her gaze was locked onto the lightning. The butler's eyes widened as he muttered that it was origin magic, stating that using origin magic meant standing at the level of a 7th circle mage. Alan stiffened again, stunned by the term. Mage circles ranged from 1 to 8, with 8 being the absolute peak. The fact that he could produce origin magic left him shaken. Kalia had come for 2 reasons: to confirm Alan's intentions since she knew he could devastate Zenonia County, and to gauge the level of the organization protecting him, the same power that had allowed him to seize control of Palacio. Instead, she witnessed something far beyond her expectations. The arrogant mage she had sponsored for years, Venkel, a 5th circle mage exiled from the magic tower for inhuman experiments and capable of annihilating entire divisions alone, stood trembling. She had never seen him afraid before, yet now, fear was unmistakable in his eyes. Kalia's thoughts trembled as the realization sank in. Was that truly origin magic? What did we just witness? RMC stepped into the room with a gaze so cold that even the air seemed to tighten around him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He calmly asked what had brought them to the county. Kalia apologized for the sudden visit, beginning to explain that she simply wanted to, but Alan cut her off with a single chilling glance. He said he would not falter, calling her the daughter of Zenonia, his tone calm yet carrying pressure so heavy it froze everyone in place. He stated clearly that what he had used earlier was not origin magic. His eyes sharpened as he added that if they felt the need to categorize his abilities, he was only at the 2nd circle. He explained again that what they had seen was not origin magic, that it was an ability useless for offense and defense, something without real effect. But the truth beneath his words was not explanation. It was a warning. Stay quiet about what you just witnessed. The message landed heavily. Both Kalia and the mage trembled, unable to maintain their usual composure. The mage broke first, bowing his head and speaking with a politeness Kalia had never seen from him before, admitting that he had been mistaken and that realization alone was shocking. Vanel, who prided himself on knowledge, now spoke gently under pressure. Meanwhile, RMC leaned back on the sofa, completely relaxed, radiating the composure of someone who had nothing to fear. He said good, satisfied, and moved on, asking again why they were here. Kalia hesitated before answering that she had finished business nearby and thought to visit. RMC responded without blinking that she didn't actually have a reason. When she admitted she didn't, he said unfortunately he had work to attend to and couldn't stay long. Kalia immediately stood, thanking him for his time and preparing to leave. But before they could exit, RMC spoke again, his voice calm, steady, and heavy with authority, telling her that if she ever needed someone to talk to, she should visit Duchess Aelia, adding that he thought the two of them would get along. Kalia turned back in confusion, repeating the name Aelia, then bowed respectfully and agreed to visit, still unsure. They departed soon after. Outside the estate, Kalia and Venkel left in their carriage while Alan watched from the entrance with Evan beside him. Evan asked why a ruined family from Zenonia County had come all the way here. Alan exhaled and said he didn't know, his expression dimming as he admitted that if rumors spread about him using origin magic, every battle-hungry lunatic in the dark world would come knocking. He hoped they understood what he meant. He didn't want trouble. There was no way, he told himself, that Zenonia would really visit Aelia. The underworld was not a place for nobles. He prayed that this would be the end of it. Inside the carriage, Kalia finally asked whether what Count Palacio had used was truly origin magic. The mage shook his head immediately and said it was not. When she asked why he had reacted that way, his face turned pale. He explained that origin magic draws its own laws on the canvas of unchanging principles and is permitted only to the pinnacle of mages. But what the Count used was something entirely different. He swallowed, admitting that he had used his observing eye to peer into Alan's magic, and what he saw made him tremble. Alan had torn the canvas itself. Kalia froze as the mage explained further that he twisted absolute unchanging principles, fixed lightning, distorted law, collapsed structure, and even after breaking everything, the spell still materialized. Clutching his temples, he said Alan had manifested an impossible miracle, that the pressure afterward was the power of forgotten gods. His voice cracked as he admitted he had studied ancient knowledge and had once been praised for it, and he warned her never to oppose Count Palacio. Kalia exhaled shakily, realizing even someone like her could not understand his intentions. She remembered Alan's words about visiting Duchess Aelia and finally understood that she had become his pawn. 5 months later, 2 full years after the children had left the orphanage, Alan asked Evan if there was any news, preferably about the children. Evan shook his head gravely and said it wasn't about them. Zenonia County and the Aelia Duchy had formed an alliance. The word struck Alan like lightning. The top 2 underworld powers had allied under an underworld convention, and no outsiders were supposed to know. Alan's heart pounded as he wondered why she had taken his words so seriously back then. He tried to dismiss the thought, telling himself the alliance was probably temporary, that Kalia was too cold and prideful to maintain it. Still uneasy, he sat down and wrote a letter, apologizing for sounding blunt or cold and asking her not to misunderstand him. He handed it to Evan and told him to deliver it to Zenonia County through the mercenary guild while keeping an eye on the children. Alan leaned back, wondering how Raiden and Seorang were doing. He hoped they were safe. He hadn't heard from them since Yusha wrote that they had arrived at their destinations. Gazing out the dim evening sky, he worried that if Sang had found the item he mentioned, she would become the pinnacle of all fighters. He recalled the relic of the Golden Mane tribe, an essence that increased critical rate upon absorption, once described as something that would have saved the sin of pride from corruption. He had given her the location of a treasure he once planned to use as emergency funds. Night fell over the desert colony, the nation of fighters where strength could earn you the entire world. Beneath the moonlit dunes, Sioring walked forward step by step, having finally completed the trial. A glowing golden aura circled her body like living flame. She raised her head and whispered thanks to the great moon, her voice trembling with joy rather than weakness. She laughed softly, admitting she once believed the essence of the Golden Mane tribe was only a legend, fairy tales told in childhood. But it was all real. The Wolfkin tribe, descendants of the greatest beast rulers, had preserved this essence for centuries, hidden and lost until now. She hadn't merely obtained it, she had become one with it. Her entire body glowed like the sun, mana surging violently around her. She clenched her fists, remembering how the great moon had saved her from dying during bioexperiments and given her this strength. Now she would avenge her parents, tearing apart the black dragon who killed them. Mana stormed around her as she shaped it precisely into her body, her spine, her soul. She declared that she would not become a mediocre gladiator. Her aura exploded upward as she vowed to become the strongest, revive the Golden Mane tribe, gather their scattered kin, and kill the black dragon with her own hands. She punched the air and a shockwave blasted through the desert, scattering sand in every direction. Standing tall beneath the moon, golden light flowing like a royal cloak, she whispered that everything she did was for him. Turning away from the trial grounds, she said it was time to begin. After 500 years, the Golden Mane tribe, the kings of Beastkin, would be revived beneath the blue moon. The scene returned to Alan as Evan suddenly remembered something, saying the Information Guild had new reports about the children and that he had meant to mention it earlier. Alan asked what it was, and Evan replied that Sioring had been performing exceptionally well in the colony. She had even earned herself the alias Golden Flash. Golden Flash, Alan thought, feeling like he had heard that name somewhere before, but regardless, he was genuinely glad she was doing well. Evan nodded, saying that in that land, as long as you had strength, you could become anything. Alan then asked about Raiden, saying he hadn't heard from him since he mentioned learning work in Rex's. Evan replied that there was some information, but they were still verifying its reliability. Alan acknowledged it, then glanced at Evan and asked whether he wasn't supposed to be busy. Evan froze and asked what he meant, insisting he had done everything Alan told him to do. Alan calmly replied that Evan needed to prepare, since it would take at least a month to reach the magic tower. Evan looked shocked, asking what magic tower, and saying this was the first time he had heard of it. Alan casually asked if he hadn't mentioned it before. Evan sighed, saying he was used to this by now, but still, he stood up immediately and said he would start preparing at once. Alan collapsed back onto the sofa, thinking that a whole month in a carriage already exhausted him just imagining it, but he had no choice. The item that could support his tiny mana hole was there. Labyrinth City brought back memories. Back in the game, he had spent countless hours grinding there. The labyrinth was located at the city's center, the signature leveling map of psychedelia. Yet despite countless attempts, no one had ever reached the end. Alan remembered using a cheat to reach the 150th floor and thinking the developers were insane, because there were even more floors beyond that. People always asked what kind of incredible items were on the 150th floor, and just like in the game, relics and artifacts appeared there regularly. Because of that, official magic appraisers became extremely wealthy and popular. Alan recalled that Renaa had mentioned taking the appraiser exam soon, and with her talent, passing wouldn't be difficult. He wondered if he had given her too small a gift compared to the others, since all it did was appraise equipment, and decided he should send her additional support if necessary. The scene shifted to Labyrinth City, Larthania, a city ruled by no one, inhabited by explorers and mercenaries. Beyond countless shops in the southern district stood a hidden appraisal shop famous for its unique services and frequented mostly by nobles and A-rank explorers. The appraisal finished, and a girl informed a wealthy noble, among them the Lord of Larthania himself, that the device ignited flames using mana. She explained it was a relic that could be imprinted, and when asked about the ability, she said a small amount of mana would keep the flame active for at least an hour with greatly improved efficiency. The noble thanked her and left. Renée responded politely before picking up another relic. Examining it, she realized it could also be imprinted. The reason the shop was so famous was because the ability to imprint was a gift from the Great Moon. An eye floated before her, wrapped in blue mana. When Alan first told her to become an appraiser, she hadn't understood why. She suspected his true identity was connected to Palin from the era of the Forgotten Outer Gods. Looking at the letter Alan had given her, instructing her to go to Labyrinth City and become a magic appraiser, she finally understood his intention. Being an appraiser itself had nothing to do with killing the black thing, but the moment she saw the gift, everything clicked. The eye of the stalker rapidly identified relics below a certain mana threshold, assisting appraisal, but now it functioned differently. The substance within it didn't exist in the library. Once its seals broke, the imprint ability awakened. To gain the power needed to fight the black thing, she would have to fully awaken it, which required sacrifices. She placed a relic before the eye as a golden beam wrapped around it and imprinting began. She smiled softly, nodding she had 252 more sacrifices remaining. By enhancing relic stats, the eye absorbed something from each sacrifice, slowly transforming itself. It reacted only to specific relic heights, and using the wrong item reset the accumulated stack. Accurately appraising relics and selecting the correct sacrifices was her role. She hugged the relic gently, whispering that this was something only she could do because she was born with the Library of Eternity. Everything was for the sake of killing the Black Wolf, all according to the will of the Great Moon. 3 weeks later, at the Blue Magic Tower, an announcement declared that the Tower Master was currently absent and that visitors should finish their business and leave. A girl spoke flatly to Alan, introducing herself as Fenia Crazine, the Vice Tower Master of the Blue Magic Tower and a 6th-class mage. She said she was busy and wanted to get it over with. Alan looked at her and felt she was familiar. He remembered her from the main storyline. She was still Vice Tower Master because the main story hadn't begun yet. In the game, she was a once-in-a-lifetime genius who reached the 8th circle at 20 and became Tower Master. The Magic Tower monopolized essential resources, giving it power rivaling nobles. Despite expecting authority, Alan saw she was buried under work. He introduced himself as Count Palacio and said he had come to discuss the gate. When she asked what about it, Alan said he could eliminate it. The time gate was a crack connecting to a mysterious subspace that appeared in areas of heavy magic use, creating dangerous anomalies where even dragons sometimes emerged. Fenia looked him over with exhaustion and asked what he planned to do with such low talent, then told him to leave. Alan was stunned. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He insisted he needed an answer. Fenia replied irritably that everyone who came said the same thing, wanting to eliminate the gate and claim treasure. Alan insisted he was telling the truth and asked her to guide him there so he could prove it. Fenia glared and accused him of trying to flip public opinion because rumors said he became count only because his siblings died. Blue mana exploded outward, crushing down on Alan and Evan. She warned him that didn't give him the right to cause trouble. Alan realized the rumor was spreading, and although it wasn't wrong, he noted how informed she was. Her eyes glowed blue as she floated slightly, terrifying both Alan and Evan. Evan whispered that if they angered her, they would be folded in half. Still, Alan stepped forward, desperate. He declared that if he failed to eliminate the time gate, he would surrender all his property to the Magic Tower. Fenia stared at him in disbelief, convinced he was still spouting nonsense. Alan shifted seamlessly into main protagonist mode and calmly said that if she wanted, he could even make an oath. He added that it wasn't a bad offer in exchange for just a little of her time. Fenia hesitated, thinking it over, then finally gestured for them to follow her. "Fine, come with me." She led them into the sealed chamber and warned him that if he failed, all his wealth would become hers. Alan replied without hesitation that it wouldn't happen. Fenia watched him closely, thinking that the timing was perfect. She wanted to find out whether he was some elaborate mastermind playing a joke or simply a lucky incompetent. After observing him, she leaned toward the latter. His mana hole was small, his sensing ability barely above average, and his talent hovered right at the edge of the second circle. What exactly was he planning to do with that? What she didn't say out loud was the truth. The time gate didn't actually need to be closed. In 3 months, it would disappear on its own after releasing the relic inside. Alan and Phinia now stood before the glowing cracks, blue light spilling across the floor. Alan began forming a hand sign. Phinia scoffed and told him that if he couldn't do anything, he should just leave, then froze mid-sentence in shock. Was he really using his hand as a medium without a staff? Even ancient magic texts classified that as primal magic, a technique closer to fairy tale-ese than reality. She snapped at him to stop imitating nonsense and leave. At that exact moment, everything stopped. Time froze. Phinia realized she couldn't move. Nothing could. Then she saw it. Her body refused to respond. The eye of observation activated on its own. As it peered through an unknown essence, her thoughts spiraled. She tried to understand it, then immediately stopped herself. No, absolutely not. Don't think, don't realize it, don't feel it. Doom was already predetermined, like a chalice filled with poison. A floating red arm emerged and formed a sign demanding absolute silence. Trembling, she acknowledged the demand. The eye filled with malice closed, and everything vanished as if nothing had ever happened. Alan turned to her calmly and said that the time gate was now closed. He added casually that it was easy for him, that he had just used a special item and some random magic, and that he would take the relic from the time gate. He mentioned he still needed to use it a few more times, which was why he had relied on random magic. Inside, he wondered if she had really fallen for it. Phinia, meanwhile, was panicking internally, her thoughts tangled in fear and confusion. Alan stepped closer and said he would appreciate it if she stayed quiet, but only if she wanted to. She recoiled, taking 2 steps back, hurriedly promising she wouldn't tell anyone and insisting she was very good at keeping secrets. Alan frowned slightly, confused by her sudden change in behavior, then turned to Evan and said they should go home. Suddenly she stopped them and thrust several bottles forward, saying they were mana potions she had made herself and begging him to take them. Alan examined the bottles and realized they were top-quality homemade mana potions, each worth a fortune. The thought alone stressed him out. Was she really this grateful just because he closed the gate? Still shaken, she quickly added that she would absolutely stay silent and even suggested making a mana oath. Alan asked if there was really any need for an oath over something so trivial, finally realizing she had misunderstood something. Before he could clarify, she activated her magic and chains bound both of them. She nervously said this proved she was good at keeping promises. Alan replied flatly that it was fine. There was no way to clear up this misunderstanding now, he thought. Curious what happens next? Tap that cheeky bell, subscribe, like, and share.